That have you ever noticed that when we give, when we practice generosity, the image of God comes out inside of us? That when we give, we practice generosity without expecting anything in return. That people are actually drawn closer to God. Because that's the very nature of who God is. If you remember in John chapter 3, verse 16, John said, "For God so loved the world that He gave." And that whenever we open up our hearts, whenever we open up our resources, our time, our talents, and even whenever we give generously with the material possessions God had entrusted us, the image of God comes out. There's something that happens inside. It not only helps us, but it begins to show other people also who God really is. And that's why when we give, I believe with all of my heart, we don't lose anything. In fact, we gain the whole world when we do so. Allow me to ask this question. Generosity changed the world once. So what would happen if the church became known for giving generously once again? Generosity changed the world once. God so loved the world that He gave His Son. What do you think would happen if the church became known for giving generously once again? And I think I myself am challenged as I'm saying this also, that we begin to find ourselves in a faith journey more as we begin to open up ourselves to this question. Because somehow God can compensate in a way that only He can. And that it is true. The generous people in the world are the happiest people in the world. Now, did you know, Paul, that that word miser, it actually comes from the same root word miserable? That people who keep hoarding, the miser, people who keep hoarding what they have, can be the most miserable people on earth. But the generous people can be the happiest people in the world. As correctly said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. So that's the third principle. It's the generosity principle. Discover the joy, the sharing principle. Discover the joy of generosity. Let's end with the last principle, and we can call this the tithing principle. And here, I'd like us to say, put God first in our finances. The tithing principle, put God first in our finance. And I think, Paul, this is the sum of it all as we end this fourth principle. I remember our lead pastor, Pastor Gina, would say, you might want to follow 4-letter P's. And when it comes to tithing, and maybe allow me to just qualify this as we move on forward. If it's your first time joining us today, welcome. We're so thankful that you're joining us and tuning in. But if you are not somebody yet, if you're somebody that still not considers Pinnacle Village as your local church, this is not really for you that is listening right now. However, if you've been with Pinnacle Village for quite some time, if you consider Pinnacle Village as your church, maybe allow me to talk to us today as one of your pastors, as one of your life coaches, about the tithing principle. Because Pastor Gina would always say there's 4-letter P's, and the first letter P is what you call the priority principle. That when we begin to put tithing as part of our daily habits, weekly or monthly habits, that tithing is part of our routine. It's part of our lifestyle already. It actually communicates our priority. Remember earlier we were saying that one of the advices, one of the insights is that you will always, always have time and money for the things that are important to you. You will always have time and money for the things that are important to you. And so wherever our money goes, they say, that's where our priorities are. That's where our heart really is. And that's why the first P is priority. We need, you're able to say, if we're saying our God is our priority, He's the number one in our lives, then that's the first letter P. The second letter P is percentage. So priority and then percentage. And that means it's seemingly that in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, it seems like 10%, or rather in the Old Testament, it seems like 10% is the recommended amount of tithe that we give. That's why it's called a tithe. But however, if we continue to read Christian history of people that have been following the way of Jesus, even in the New Testament, we begin to realize that we're not just limited to 10%. That maybe for many of us, we start with 10%. We start with a certain percentage. Because after that percentage is progress. Priority, percent, and then progress. That time will come as we continue to prioritize God with our finances, as we give and commit to a certain percentage each time. Time will come. God will bless us. God will continue to bless us. God will continue to give. And the time will come when we're going to feel we have somehow moved or advanced in our life. And maybe that certain percentage we committed with from the beginning, it doesn't feel like a faith journey anymore. Maybe in the beginning we felt like 10%, oh Lord, this is really a faith journey, that every time we give, every time we commit to this, that you feel something is really happening and you feel like you're getting to know God more. But God begins to bless us, and then after some time we feel it doesn't touch us anymore. It seems like it's nothing, it's not painful anymore. It's just normal already. We would like to say, go progressive, progress giving. If we're okay already with 10%, and by the way, maybe, I thank God that this principle was communicated to me also at a young age, that I guess for me, when I think about percentage giving, going beyond 10%, I'd like to think of it this way, that, Lord, when I give that extra 1%, for example, when I give 11, that extra 1%, I don't want to give 10, I want to give 11. Lord, this extra 1% is actually something that represents my heart already. That this is what I'm giving, Lord. It's not a command from you anymore, but I'm giving from my heart already. Lord, this is not something that you expect me to do, but this is just me. This is just me saying, Lord, I love you. And so this one I give to you extra. That for the longest time here in Pinnacle Village, we understand God does not really want our money. But what God is looking for is our hearts. So every time we send that Zelle, every time we send through that PayPal or through that PushPay, may it be said that, Lord, every time I send this, it represents my heart. That as God continues to progress us, may our giving be progressive as well. And then the last letter P, as Coach Ina would say, is prodding. The prodding of God's Spirit, God's voice in our hearts. Because sometimes God will prod us to do something crazy. Withdraw all of our money from our savings account, give it to a cause. Give it to a need. Sometimes God will prod our hearts. Mary breaks out that jar of expensive perfume worth years of wages and just gives up an offering to the Lord. Sometimes God prods us. And whenever we feel that voice, that tug from God, we have to be sensitive to it. Because as we do so, our faith and our relationship with Him becomes even better. It becomes even sweeter. And so, Andy Stanley actually somehow said it this way. Until Jesus is first in your finances, Jesus isn't first. You're not a follower, you're a user. And Judas tried that. Ouch. And so as we end today, as we wrap things up today, we begin to somehow just summarize all of these 4 principles. That everything that I have really belongs to God. That's a trust principle. And the second is the contentment principle, that I just thank God with what I have. $10 is just $10. And the third is the generosity principle, the sharing principle, that I begin to discover the joy of sharing what God had given to me. And this last is the tithing principle, that we put God first in our finances. Now, there's just 3 major reasons why we are actually told to give our tithe. And maybe we can summarize it with these 3 reasons. The first is it's an act of gratitude for the past. That when we give our tithe, and even not our tithe, but our heart that represents that tithe, it's somehow telling ourselves, Lord, I want to be reminded of your goodness, your faithfulness, that everything comes from you, that I would not really have this if not from you from the beginning. And so I'm grateful to you for the past. When we give it also, it is also an act of priority for the present. That we're actually telling God, I want you to be number one in my life. And to prove it, I'm putting you first in my money. That, Lord, I don't want it to just be lip service. That, Lord, I want it to be able to say that you are first place in my life. And I'm doing it by putting you first in my finances as well. And number 3, it's an act of faith for the future. That, God, I know your promises. I know that you will take care of me. And I know that you've proven yourself to be trustworthy. And so I'm giving this tithe. I'm giving this even maybe beyond the tithe that you have talked about me with. Because I trust you for the future as well. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. Also, in the description box below, we have discussion questions for you to share with a friend, or visit our website at pinnaclevillage.org. Catch us live every Sunday at 10 a.m. We hope to see you there.